Oh no.
We're going down. No, I made a bet with my friends. We're a lot. It's not going to be me. Water body. All the way down.
What's your exercise?
Huh?
What do you do for exercise?
Not a lot. I mean, it was just yeah. Well, it's 75% diet. That's the whole thing. I mean, I do a lot of back. So I had a couple of muscle memory. I knew my body before, and I knew exactly how to do it. I knew how to win. And I knew how to win. So I did So what I did is I immediately told everybody everywhere I was crushing.
How much did you bet?
Huh?
Did I ask you, did you give away how much you wagered?
Yeah, so we both weighed 190. We both win or wait. Win or wait.
Win. Wait, what was the wager?
You didn't win. There was no winning. There was just not losing.
It was humiliating.
Yeah, because he said originally it's got to be substantial. I said, what's $5,000? I said, that's not going to work. Because the way my mind works, I'll do the math, and I'll realize
You get lazy.
the amount of work I'm going to have to do
To get $5,000.
I want to get a lot more.
Yeah.
I need some And he goes, well, you need I said, are you sure you want to go there? Yeah, bring it. All right, here it is. Whoever loses, dresses in drag, dances the hula, because there's 200 investors on our annual cruise. And he goes, okay, you're on. I said, you serious? I'm going to destroy you. You understand that? I'm going to destroy you. And he popped up. I immediately went to everybody that was there. I said, hey, everybody, I just want to make an announcement. And everywhere we went for the next month, we showed up a month later, 2 months later, in Las Vegas for the Bob Helmet birthday party. We showed up, and I'd already lost. Already, because I immediately felt who said it, you know, and Anyway, so he's sitting there, he hadn't even started, he sees it going off. Now I'm in his head.
Yeah.
Oh,
no.
I just, when I got down to 10%, I sent him my test results, because I bought a free package of the water to body fat test. So I went in and I got tested, because we had the benchmark, right? So he said he was 197 pounds. I was right at 97 pounds when I wanted to run. That's where we started. And I said, he didn't want to body fat. I didn't want to do weight. Because weight is it's got to be balanced. And I said, he goes, well, I don't want to do body fat percentage because you already have the advantage. I said, all right, let's do body fat now. You have the advantage. It's going to be easier for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator is here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in your house. Okay. All right, everybody. Here's Debbie.
Well, it was announced, I just came from Paris and I had a blast. And, you know, it's quite an experience. As you can imagine, the United Nations hold the same old tricks as they always have. It's all about show. It's all about, they get to run the city. They get to run around in their limos, with their police cavalcades, with their helicopters, with their private jets. But you and I, we must change our lifestyle according to them. Because according to the United Nations and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, we human beings, especially us in North America, are just way too destructive for planet Earth. The book I have right here is called the President's Council on Sustainable Development. It was Executive Order 12852 by President Clinton. And I'll just read from this report just to start us off, just in case someone doesn't understand what, or someone newly is listening to about United Nations Agenda 21. Again, from Executive Order 12852. Effective execution of Agenda 21, in other words, the agenda for the 21st century, will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action. What human action are you doing right now? Eating. What else?
Breathing.
Breathing. They say every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision making at every level. And that's exactly what they're doing, what they did, what they're agreeing upon in Paris. Daniel Webster said, if all my possessions were taken from me with one exception, I would choose to keep the power of communication, for by it I would soon regain all the rest. We need to keep communicating. This is what he's saying here. Do not stop communicating. Do not stop reaching out to your friends and your family. This topic, United Nations Agenda 21, in my opinion, is the most important topic that any one of us should be talking about. Just a question here, or a thought. Has anybody talked to someone outside of this room, inside this hotel, about United Nations Agenda 21? Every single hand should be up. It is going to get so uncomfortable here forward. I predict that 2016 is going to be one of the most extraordinary, transformational years in our history. Remember what Obama said. We are just 5 days away from what? Fundamentally transforming the United States of America. I, like you, demand the truth. And we're not getting the truth. That's why I ran for Congress in 2012. And in 2012, I also went to the Rio Earth Summit, Rio Plus 20 is what it's called, the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, because in the 21st century, sustainable development is our way of life. And they called it the future we want. Now, the future we want wasn't lacking in Paris. That statement came up all the time. And you know, I missed something at Rio Plus 20. I missed, but has seen in the last couple years, you all know who this fellow is. He was also at Rio Plus 20, but you see Murray Strong, you see his button here. It says, Step Up Agenda 21. In other words, let's step it up. Let's push harder. Well, here's my little take on Paris. I just finished it today, and it's just a little slice of what you could have seen if you joined me in Paris. And you know, I'm not a movie director, but I was sitting next to one, or a movie producer, or whatever. What do you call yourself?
Filmmaker.
Filmmaker. I'm not that either. But anyway, this will just give you a little idea of what I saw. And I have hours and hours of video. I have tons of pictures. But hopefully this just gives you a little sneak peek about some of the things that I saw while I was in Rio.
Here we are inside the general area, the public area of COP21. And to my right over here is a tribe-worthy tree, and people can come and write notes to the earth. So you can see that people are writing notes like, we are not drowning, we are fighting to stay alive. Oh, check out this one. It's our time to move the environment movement forward relentlessly, like a Terminator, like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
But we just have arrived in Paris for COP21. There will be all kinds of great action. There's great enthusiasm.
Carbon pricing is a way for governments to incentivize reduction of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions.
See, we are a U.S. NGO, and we do behavior change communications.
What would be the ideal population based on sustainable development?
If there was an ideal population number, it's unlikely that we'll be able to get back to it. I think we have surpassed it. It's unlikely that we can return to it, but there's certainly a stabilization that we can look for.
We have to meet Tarek from
Egypt.
Egypt. And Tarek, we just started talking to him, and Tarek is just like us. He has concern.
I came here to find out what is being said. And The books I've gathered are like, as I told you, are collecting evidence.
So besides seeing a lot of, I used to be a corporate event planner for Google, and I know green events, I know big events, I even did events for future presidents. And I can tell you, just like Rio Plus 20, this event was full of hypocrisy. They brought in subflooring, they brought in lighting, they brought in heating, they brought in air conditioning, they brought in specialty lighting. There was so much food around COP, convention or conference of parties, that the waste was absolutely enormous. Planes being, private planes being, and jets and helicopters. It was unreal. Just like Rio Plus 20, there were buses idling for hours waiting to pick up attendees. There were cops all over. Every corner around COP21 had 5, 10 cops on a corner, no joke, many of them with machine guns. And we little people could not go into the blue zone, highly protected. I could only go into the general area. But a group that was able to go into the blue zone is CFACT. It's Craig, many of you know Craig Rucker, many of you know Climate Depot. Mark Morano, he's often on news media talking about the whole climate change. And the other thing that I got to go do while I was in Paris, and this was one of the reasons why I really just sealed the deal, why I wanted to go and spend my own money and my own time going to this conference, is because I wanted to see the red carpet premiere of a new film coming out in 2016 called Climate Hustle. So I'll give you a little sneak peek of what CFACT and Climate Depot came up with. Oh, by the way, prior to the premiere, I spent the entire day with scientists, and including Lord Monckton. I was with rocket scientists, climatologists. I was with mathematicians. All these people, the scientists who don't agree with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, who do not agree with the IPCC. Every event we did was met with protesters, protesting coal. And yet when you look at these people, you see that everything they're wearing, so they're protesting, greenhouse gases. And as a cattle rancher's daughter, I can tell you that everything they were wearing was either livestock byproduct or fossil fuel petrol byproduct. And just, to do my ag industry a little bit of credit here, that practically everything in this room is livestock byproduct. The asphalt out on the street, the tires that you drive on to get here on the asphalt is livestock byproduct. The two things that the United Nations, the two greenhouse gas categories that the United Nations and the IPCC are going after are methane and petrol, fossil fuel. So if we are to divest from fossil fuel and we are to divest from greenhouse gas emitters like methane, can you imagine the impact on our daily life? It is going to be extraordinary. This is a quick clip from what happened. You'll see that it's from YouTube, and I do this because I want you to see that you can also find this on YouTube. So anyway, here we go.
We're here on the streets of downtown Paris, and we're about to have our movie premiere tonight, which is Monday, December 7th. We're going to have a big red carpet premiere. This morning we're greeted with wanted posters. We are being called the Criminal du Climate, climate criminals, and these wanted posters are all over the city. Hold that.
Hi, I'm Mark Morano. Welcome to the World Fair. It's a fantastic movie. It was very informative. It was very entertaining. It made me laugh. For me, it never was right.
Certainly laid out the notion that there is not a quote-unquote scientific consensus.
We could be indoctrinated. This film makes you think.
I think it's something that's both funny, very informative, and certainly very well researched, using that breadth of divergent scientific statement from many different institutions and subdisciplines of climate science is a tremendous strength.
And I really appreciate the comedy and the science and putting and blending those together.
You can think, you listen, and make up your mind.
It was a great film, before me.
Each of those guys in Ukraine know what they're talking about.
People who are my age remember being scared by global cooling.
Mark Morano is fantastic.
Yes, it's sense-minded. But it's important to hear them talk, you know, and then they're politely and ridiculing themselves. So that's why it's fun of the movie.
It addresses reality, not imaginary figures.
One is around us, it's not good.
So I hope everybody sees this film.
Oh, I really did. I really enjoyed it. I had it.
This film is funny. And what they do is they take media clips from the 1970s where we were being warned of global cooling. And then just 10 years after that, all of a sudden the global warming rhetoric started. So when it comes out in early 2016, they're going to get this in movie theaters. It's going to be available on DVDs. I hope you get it out there. It is a really great film, and the way they did it is they had so much fun, which is something I think we all need to start doing, is having fun with, you know, this whole global warming hype, because I know that truth is on our side, and when the history starts to catch up, and, you know, we are going to be people who say, okay, so we told you this was happening, and our credibility is just going to skyrocket as things start to unfold in 2016. The United Nations IPCC said, Dr. Ottmar Edenhofer said, we redistribute de facto the world's wealth by climate policy. One has to free oneself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy. This has almost nothing to do with environmental policy anymore. It doesn't. Because what the United Nations is up to is now taking under what they call the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing. How many of you are part of CalPERS or CalSTRS? Your pension funds are now being used to fund Agenda 21 and the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. CalPERS and CalSTRS and retirement systems all over the United States, including the AFL-CIO, signed an MOU with the United Nations. It's called the Montreal Pledge, under something called environmental social governance. So the United Nations has attacked practically every industry. In fact, one of the side events at the Paris conference was called Sports and Innovation. What they decided to do with sports, with professional sports, is now do behavior change for sustainable development living, for reducing your consumption, which is, you know, just to indoctrinate, to educate people under sustainable development goals. Daniel Webster said, our destruction, should it come at all, will be from another quarter. From the inattention of the people to the concerns of their government, from their carelessness and negligence, I must confess that I do apprehend some danger. I fear that they may place too implicit a confidence in their public servants and fail properly to scrutinize their conduct. That in this way they may be made the dupes of designing men. How many feel that way right now? We are getting duped, and I think it's our fault. You know, this room should be full right now. Standing room only. No more preaching to the choir. It has to be beyond that. It has to get uncomfortable. That every hand, when I said, have you talked to someone outside of the room, or outside of this room, have you talked to someone about Agenda 21? It has to be. We have to be that vigilant. We have to be that aggressive. Christiana Figueres forewarned us last year. Here's what she said about the Paris conference. Oh, Christiana Figueres is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat. Here's what she had to say in prep at the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investing, UNPRI, conference that was in Montreal.
Because my friend, this is it. We have 15 months to put a regulatory framework in everybody's guide. If we do not do this in Paris, the economic consequences are going to be understood. But I also want to say political consequences.
Political consequences. What political consequences is she talking about? Were you wondering if they came up with an agreement? Yeah? This is a film that has been leading up to the Paris conference that can be seen, a little clip, in the theaters. Has anybody seen? You've seen it? Well, check this out.
We have a plan. The global goals for people and planet to end poverty, to fight inequality, and to defeat climate change. And I am proud to announce the plan is agreed by everyone.
The United Nations has launched a plan to fight poverty, injustice, and climate change. Tell everyone. Join us at globalgoals.org.
So they did agree on a few things. They agreed, and by the way, the final text is still coming forward, but it is the draft, and they call it the final draft, and the final text is coming forward. From Executive Director of Greenpeace International, Kumi says, the wheel of climate action turns slowly, but in Paris it is turned. This deal puts the fossil fuel industry on the wrong side of history. Jennifer Morgan, World Resources Institute. It took hard work, grit, and guts, but countries have finally united around a historic agreement that marks a turning point on the climate crisis. The Paris Agreement marks a new form of international cooperation, one where developed and developing countries are united by a common and fair framework. The agreement is both ambitious and powered by the voices of the most vulnerable. Michael Bruni, is that right? Executive Director of Sierra Club. The Paris Agreement is a turning point for humanity. First, for the first time in history, the global community agreed to action that sets the foundation to help prevent the worst consequences of the climate crisis while embracing the opportunity to exponentially grow our clean energy economy. Decisive leadership and action from President Obama and other world leaders, an increasingly powerful climate movement, and strong progress in the U.S. and globally to move off coal cleared the way for every nation to come to the table. Here's an example of where we're heading. This is Ecoscience. This was written by Paul Ehrlich and Ann Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich, you know, the professor from Stanford who wrote Population Bomb. and John P. Holdren, who is our science czar. They propose establishing a money-independent price on every activity that has a clear environmental impact. The basic non-monetary unit would be the natural resource unit. The overall level of environmental impact would be regulated by government establishment of both the total yearly allocation of NRUs and the price and NRU of every good. In other words, they take a resource from the environment, they put a value to it, kind of like climate or cap and trade for carbon pricing, and then they distribute them. So what does that look like? It might be possible, for instance, for an individual to have a second child or to fly a light aircraft 100 hours per year, but not both. Or one might decide to have an air-conditioned house, but if so, an overseas vacation might be possible once in every 10 years. In other words, the goal is to limit, not only limit your lifestyle in every fashion, but also limit the amount of resources that we can extract from the earth. So they came up with a 1.5, we read, it might be 1.6. It was going to be 2 degrees, but at this conference they got more aggressive. So now it's a 1.5 or 1.6 degree. In other words, 3.6, no more than 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit in the change of the environment in the through the next of the century. To give developed countries, so developed countries must help developing countries. What's that? Wealth redistribution. Developed countries must pay for catastrophes. Now, whether or not Obama agreed to this yet, I do not know. He wanted a non-binding agreement so that he could avoid Senate ratification. But the rest of the countries weren't going along with that. And I don't know what they ended up coming up with. We'll know on Monday. And then binding. Either way you look at it, the United States is in big trouble. And how are they doing this? Through the Sustainable Development Goals. Anybody familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030? How many? How many are familiar with this SDG 2030 goals? Not enough. When are they signing? Guess whose birthday? It's Earth Day, which is Marxist Lenin's birthday. You think there's a coincidence? No. So let's just go through some of the Sustainable Development Goals that were signed in New York on September 25th through the 27th. Do you remember when the Pope was here? Do you remember when Putin was here? President of China? They were all in New York signing on to Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. To end poverty, promote prosperity and well-being for all, protect the environment, and address climate change. In 2015, countries will adopt a new Sustainable Development Agenda and a new global agreement on climate change. Done. Here's the draft. The post, this is actually the final. The 2030 Agenda for Global Action, the post-2015 Development Agenda. In other words, the post-millennium development goals. And you can see this agenda is a plan for action, planet, and prosperity. We are resolved to free the human race from tyranny and poverty. We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps needed to shift the world on a sustainable development path, and no one will be left behind. So what are some of these goals? I just took a few of them, and there's like 130, 60, 180, something like that. Target 1.4 by the year 2030. Ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over land, and other forms of property. Where are they getting this property, I ask you? Do you think that the government is going to give it to them? How about this one? Ensure significant mobilization of resources from a variety of sources to implement programs and policies to end poverty in all its dimensions. Who is the only one who can get you out of poverty? You. Governments keep you impoverished, but you are the only one who can get you out of poverty. Some people choose to be poor. Some people don't want to work, and you cannot force them. But through policy, they are going to end poverty in all its dimensions. How about this one? By 2020, maintain the genetic diversity of seeds. What is it? GMO. By 2030, end the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria. What is it? Vaccinations. By 2020, have, and love this one, have the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. How are they going to do that?
Robot cars. They kill you before they take off.
No cars?
Robot cars.
Robot cars?
Yeah, they kill you before they
Depopulate the earth?
Right.
By the year 2030. Achieve, here's another one, achieve universal health care. Single payer system. Do you think that the failure of Obamacare was an accident?
No.
Target 4.1 by 2030. Ensure that all girls and boys complete free education. Equitable, quality, primary and secondary education leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. Who is the one that says, who says whether or not it's relevant to you? Not the government. By 2030, ensure that all learners, okay, these are tied, all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development. In other words, from cradle to grave, you will be a sustainable development student. And what is sustainable development?
Slavery.
The 3 E's, right? Social equity, environmental justice, and economic justice. And where they all come together, that is what's called sustainable. Eliminate all forms of violence. This is another great one. Against all women and girls in the public and private spheres. Okay, I'm against violence. But if it's happening in someone's home, whether it's yelling or otherwise, how do you end it in someone's home? In a private place. Protect and restore water-related ecosystems. Under WOTUS, what isn't a water-related ecosystem? Under waters of the United States of America, even the rain dropping off of your roof is considered part of the waters, or they would like to see it part of the WOTUS. So protect and restore water-related ecosystems, including mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes. That is everything. By 2030, enhance inclusive and sustainable urbanization and capacity for participatory, integrated, and sustainable human settlement planning and management in all countries. In other words, what Michael was talking about earlier, the One Bay Area Plan. By 2020, substantially increase the number of cities and human settlements adopting and implementing integrated policies and plans towards inclusion, resource efficiency, mitigation, and adaptation to climate change. In other words, every area of your life is now included. Because under climate change or climate risk or global warming or whatever they call it these days, the United States is now responsible for the economic disasters, the physical disasters that happen in third island nations. If the seas are rising, if a tornado comes, it doesn't matter. It could be a drought. It could be, the next day a flood. And we are now responsible under this accord. Implement the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. In other words, if it's not sustainable, you must not consume it. You must not purchase it. This is making sense. One of the ways they plan to do this, as Michael had mentioned earlier, is population is a big key for them, as you saw in that video, too. Everywhere I went, it was, and talked to people, that there are way too many people on the earth. This is a book, a children's book called Rescue Mission Planet Earth. The forward with Boutros Ghali, and of course Al Gore was fully responsible for this book. But on page 32, Human World Baby Bomb says the planet groans every time it registers another birth. So life is changing for us, and it's going to get uncomfortable. And I request, I know we're all active and we're all busy, but we're not busy enough. It's no more, you can't get tired anymore. There's no time to be tired. There's no time to, are you all feeling that too? Daniel Webster, one of my favorite, said, make them intelligent and they will be vigilant. We need to be mad, mean, sharing machines. To be educated, to get these Agenda 2030 goals are going to be super, uber important that we understand and share as quickly as we can the devastation that it will be to every single human being on earth, but here in the United States, we know what freedom and liberty is. And therefore, for us, I believe we're going to feel bigger pain than any other country, any other people. If you do not know your first 5 rights in the First Amendment, you are losing one of them right now. If you are not using them, you are losing them. If you cannot define liberty, you cannot defend liberty. Freedom and liberty are different. They're not the same. What makes America work is that we have liberty. And with liberty, you have a moral compass. And with that moral compass, you get to say who your creator is. I choose God for my creator. God gave me my rights. He gave me my natural rights. It wasn't government who gave me my rights. But the United Nations, as you all know, is creating a vast global governance system. And they're about ready to seal the deal. Liberty is your moral compass. And because we are not a free nation, as most people say, if we were a free nation, I'd be free to murder, I'd be free to steal. But because we have liberty, we have a moral compass that says I cannot do those things. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. And if you are not correcting people right now, as they say, oh, and I'm hearing this all the time, we're a democracy. No, we are not. The difference between a democracy and a monarchy is how many people rule over you. Daniel Webster said, make them intelligent and they will be vigilant. Give them the means for detecting the wrong and they will apply the remedy. It's time to draw a line in the sand and stand. I know all of you because of who you are and the fact that you're here. And I know each and every one of you would rather die on your feet than live a day on your knees. But it's time that we have to stand and say, I'm either going to be an American or an American.
Good thing we don't have another speaker. They can follow that. Considering all of the hiccups we had. So this comes to the wonderful Q&A period. So here's the plan. We're going to ask all of our presenters to come forward, take a chair, sit along the front, and then we'll call upon each of the presenters one by one to come here and answer 2 questions. Then we'll rotate to the next one. That way we'll zoom all the way down the line. And after that, then it's free for all. Ask anybody any questions in any sequence. That's the plan. And so let's get it.
That would be a short delay. They like doubled it up on 9/11. All of a sudden, that's 3 times brand. It's how paid. Oh, so I got debate3.org. Nice. And debate3.org. So back. So for the internet, that's what else. Or for my open debate. I think that could go. Make it build it on top of it. Okay, well, I get this plan going here. Plan is that speakers will come here, answer the questions, and the audience will go there, ask questions.
They told us at Q&A would tell us the difference between state and government.
I can get asked your questions. I'll answer that one first. Actually, I guess I'll get the first question. I was asked, amplify my statement that there was a difference between my use of the word state and the word government. And I think it's very profound, at least in terms of how I see it. Right? What is the purpose of government? Well, it's the government. The word does those things. So anybody here thinks that it wants to do that?
think so. But why don't we say, what kind of a government do we have? By using that word, what kind of government do we have? What kind of government do we want? It's, we've answered our own question. We just want to be governed. We've already yielded on the very basic fact that we use the word government. We get complicated because we have people who call themselves anarchists. That's what the fancy words for it. And we get the impression that that means no government. And we think that means it's lawless. There's no authority, no control. It's just anarchy. And so I had to face that question long ago because I kept saying, I don't really want a government. But I didn't want to communicate the idea that by saying that, that implied that I really believe in social order. And so I had to take that thing through and find it on what do you really want. And to use different words to describe this thing, the thing is the state. Because now we ask the question, what kind of a state do we want? And the door is open now to define what kind of a state we want without having to undefine the word state. I think one of the, perhaps the greatest element of the miracle of the American Republic is that it was created by literally geniuses. First time in history that a state was created that was in fact not a government. But our founding fathers used the word government anyway because that was the word they inherited. That's what you called it back in the day. King George had a government. What kind of a government? Well, not. It's a government. All the governments of the world did exactly what they were supposed to do. They governed. But when the American Constitution was created, it did something different. It turned everything around. The governors who used to be at the top issuing the directives, the source of sovereignty was at the top, was turned upside down. Now the source of sovereignty is at the bottom. The people. We the people. What a revolutionary concept. My conclusion was that they did not create a government, even though they used the word. But what word can you use to describe it? There was no such word. And so I said, okay, nobody else has any better idea. Let's use the word protectorate. I know if you look up the word protectorate in the dictionary, you'll find that it typically means some little country that is relying on a larger country to defend militarily. And in return for that, the large company gets to dominate the small company. I mean, the small country, and the little country becomes a little large. But it doesn't have to be that, because in a broader sense, a protectorate would be anything which protects. Now, you see where I'm going with this. Earlier I said the only legitimate use of, in my view, the only legitimate use of legalized coercion force, lethal force, is to protect the life, liberty, property of its citizens. And so if we want the state to do that for us, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate, proper, and glorious function of the state, to protect us and nothing more, then I think we should call it a protectorate. And by using that word instead of government, we clear the garbage out of the vocabulary and out of our brain. If our founding fathers had written a constitution and said, this protectorate is designed to do this, and this protectorate is designed to do that, from that day forward, all the school kids that were studying the Constitution from that point forward would be reading that word protectorate. And the question then would be, well, what kind of a government do you have? The question would be, what kind of a protectorate do you have? And just by asking that question, you have planted the idea that you're looking for a special quality in the role of the state. And I see that as a very important distinction because we don't have to get into the position of arguing against our anarchist friends who don't really mean that most anarchists just don't like government. That's what they're developing. And so they're saying the only way we can get rid of a government is to have anarchy, which is no government. Well, they get half credit for that because anarchy is no government. That's true. But it doesn't mean it is without some very bad features to it. Nobody ever saw that there was another possibility. And so we finally come to the conclusion. I think there is a third possibility. You can have anarchy, which is no legalized recognition of authority to control society, which includes no ability to protect you and me. The minute you hire or retain any entity, whether it's a government or a corporation or a partnership or a family group or whatever it is, a mafia, I don't care. Whenever you authorize some other group to protect you, your life, liberty, and property, you've created an entity that is very dangerous. And it doesn't make any difference whether you call it government or call it a corporate structure, or whether it's a black military outfit. What is that? Blackwater, yeah. But there's an idea of a corporation a military force. So just by getting away from government doesn't really solve anything. You have to talk about what are the limitations that are placed upon this legalized use of authority. So that's what I meant to say. Is that let's clear the vocabulary, and quit using it with government, and things get a lot easier. And I found that since I've done that, I get very little feedback from people that say, "Oh, you want anarchy, and therefore you want the strongest person to rule it." So you avoid it. Does that make sense? Okay. Here we start with Randall. Tea Party. I'm a Tea Party expert. Questions? Fine way to start out. There we go. I got one.
Okay, you're active in the central committees. Isn't that over?
We need to have to come up to this microphone up here.
Gary Arnold. I've heard that 70% of the Central Committee of the Republican Party in the state is pretty much controlled by the Munger, Firestone, Rockefeller network, and that 3 members of the Ripon Society that was formed for Nelson Rockefeller's to put in his plans of his new federalism is actually the regionalization. And we've got 3 elected congressmen. We've got Ken Colbert, Kevin McCarthy, and Darrell Issa, members of the Rockefeller Ripon Society. When you go up to the state and you've got 70% against you, how do you fare? Are there several places in the state that are more kind to our beliefs?
That's a good question. Actually, it's getting better. We've figured out that local government, which Michael was talking about, and actually Edward was talking about, that's the key. That's where we need to take it back. So when we go to the state, we can basically interface with the California Republican Party and Jim Brulte and all of his cronies up there. But we need to take the power back in the counties. So there's 58 counties. Right now, thanks to some diligent work by some great people, Lori Drake being one, she actually took over Contra Costa County seat, you can believe it, up in the bosom of the beast, up in Contra Costa County is in San Francisco, up in San Francisco. Fresno, we've gotten Fresno, we've gotten some of them in Darien. We're taking back San Luis County. Probably by the middle of January, we got an election on January 7th. I think we will have a true conservative as the chair of San Luis County. So all in all, we have 3 that are sympathetic to the conservative movement. We have actually probably 13 or 14 that are actually truly Tea Party or conservative. And the word Tea Party, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, a conservative is a conservative, whether they call themselves a libertarian, they call themselves a Tea Party, whatever they call themselves, we're all after the same goal. We have different limits and we have different ways that we think we should get there, but we're all after the same goal. So it's a little bit higher than 3%, but not much. They know in Sacramento that we're coming. They know that we're working to take over our counties, and they're fighting like hell to keep us from doing it. Fighting like hell. Little aside, Charles Munger's story, when
Jim Rulty took over the chairmanship of the party. Tom Del Vaccaro, who was the chair prior to him, ran the party $1 million in debt. We had a tab of $1 million. Well, I've been told by people in the know that that wasn't really that surprising, that there is a deficit that goes from one to another. Plus, Mr. Munger cut off the faucet for donations to the Republican Party to Mr. Del Vaccaro. He basically told PG&E, told the unions, SEIU, all these groups, no more giving money to the Republican Party until we get rid of Tom Del Vaccaro, because Tom wouldn't play his game. So there were $1 million in debt, and Mary and I went to the convention where Jim Rulty was anointed as the chair. Charles Munger got up, got a standing O, you were there, got a standing ovation. He wrote a check for $980,000 and paid off the debt of the Republican Party. That whole room erupted. I know you didn't stand and clap. Mary and I looked at each other and said, what the hell's wrong with these people? They let one man pay off the debt of a political party? How could we not be in his pocket? So that's where we're at in California. Anything else?
I know that Ron was very active in candidate vetting. It's an important process that people don't talk about. So I'd like to get your views on how you go about that.
There's some different thoughts on that, and actually a mentor of mine, Steve Frank, I don't know if any of you know Steve. Steve Frank has actually a vetting guide, so anybody here that would like it, and it's available, and he'll give it to you. It's pretty intrusive. It asks a lot of hard questions, but according to Steve, who has run a lot of campaigns, you need to know these things going in. You know, not just have you ever been convicted of a felony. You know, have you ever done so and so that can be traced back to you? You know, we need to know in our candidates where they are at, and you know what their lives are all about. That's pretty much what we do. Steve Frank has given us that vetting guide that we use. But usually I can tell, I'm a pretty good judge of character with a person, and by talking to them, you can kind of know where they're at and what they're doing. But for actual candidates, we do use the vetting guide.
Question for Randy.
Randall Bankline, a question for you, because I'm involved in a couple of local campaigns. And the first thing I hear from the establishment players is, to win a campaign, you need to have one of our people help you win. Were you approached in a similar fashion? And if so, how did you pick your campaign manager and surround yourself with those that are liberty-minded to help you?
Little background on me. I've been involved in politics for about 20 years. I started out as kind of a gun activist. I'm on the board of directors of Montana Shooting Sports Association. They've passed over 56 program bills, according to the NRA, more than any organization on a state level, any state in the United States. I was U.S. Senator, statewide director. I was U.S. Congressman's gun guy. I came up with an idea. We had a gun show and had a table for a congressman. We were having problems getting people involved. So what I did is I said, we're going to have a gun table, and instead of selling tickets to get a chance to win the gun, I came up with an idea that if you would agree to put the yard sign, we'd give you a chance to win the gun. We've got 800 yard sign locations in Hale. With 50 gun shows a year in Montana, we produce 40,000 yard sign locations, and the guy running for Senate never did get 40,000 signs put up. Well, then I thought, oh, you know, why not ask if they're registered to vote? If you're not, you register to vote, you get a chance to win the gun. If you put up 2 signs, I'll let you enter to win the gun again. If you put up a 4x8 sign on the side of a major road, then we get a chance to win the gun. 4 chances. We just modified it from there and went on. Well, then U.S. Senator Conrad Burns is a pretty good guy, good record, came to me and said, I want you to be my statewide director. And then what happened, is I got frustrated with the person representing me. I put my sign, his sign up. The person I ran against, I was putting signs up in my district because I wanted a Republican to represent me. Then the NRA came to me and said, hey, look, he's voting anti-gun, so do something about it. I sat down with him and I said, you need to change how you vote. Yes, Randy, will. And he didn't. And then we found someone right against him. You heard the story, someone talked him out of it. Well, I didn't really need a campaign manager because I really was. I managed my own campaign. And we're on a much smaller budget. I found out tonight that your representatives work full time. In Montana, I'm only a representative 4 months out of every 2 years. I only get paid $3,000. I'm $10,000 debt of my campaign. Dry cleaning the suit that I had to buy one, spent a quarter of what I got paid. So you really don't have a budget. I just did it because I was upset. We only lost the Agenda 21 vote by 10 votes. If I had the speakers here tonight in Montana testifying before my committee, we would win. What you said tonight, the 2 of you, we'd have had a baby. So if I get elected again, and they do have a primary against me, because I'm in, and I go after this, you know what I want to do is try to improve the writing of the bill. I'd like this very group here to work with Dan Hackle on improving how we wrote the bill, because it was a little rough. We're breaking new ground. And then I'd like these 2 speakers to come to Montana and testify on the bill. If I'm within 10 votes, what's going to happen next time? I'm not going to lose ground. We should win it. So I guess that's my way to answer.
We are so proud of you in Montana. You are an outstanding first-term legislator, and we admire your support, especially in the big issue of the War Compact. You were opposing it, and you had the strength to stick by your guns, even though the Rules Committee was adjusting it so that they won. But the question I'm asking is, actually, this is bigger than water. We all know that, you particularly, is the forms of government that we're facing, the powers at every level of government, the forms of government that we're facing, the federal government working through the Indians who they own and support the First Welfare Recipients, the state, and the tribes that have their own constitution thanks to the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. They were supposed to have wiped out all these treaties of the past and operate on the new constitution. They jumped backwards. They have their own legislators, Indian state legislators. They have their own congressional, federal legislators or congressmen. And at the same time, we cannot go in and touch them with their government, their constitution. We have no power in the states. We now have the immigrants coming here, just not the Mexicans, but the refugees. Within the state, we can say we don't want refugees, but they are their own little country. They are sovereign, their own boundary. They will use our laws if it's to their advantage, and we have no way to touch it. How can we straighten out this governmental mess? No one at the congressional level is going to do it. How we as citizens, we see what's happening down the road. The government can take over federal government through the Indians. What's your thinking? How can we?
Good question. That could be a long answer. We're going to
That's a long question.
How many Indian reservations in California?
7.
Okay, we have more in Montana than that. Okay, so I'm in judiciary. I was lucky enough to make enough of an impression where they trusted me in that very important committee. The Native Americans showed up with one bill after another asking for money. One of the arguments they made in the bill no one speaks the Native American language on the Indian reservations too much anymore. In some reservations, only 3 or 4 people speak the language. We'd like $2 million from the taxpayers in Montana so we could teach the Native American language. I said, well, I don't have a reservation in my district, but I do have a Literate colony, and every kid knows German by the time he's 8. Why don't you require teaching in schools and leave the taxpayers out? Well, because we're asking you. And we want a decision. Well, I cannot support it. And the press said I was a racist. Okay. And we have Republican control on the House floor, but enough Republicans voted with the Democrats that they passed that. I was quite upset and disappointed because I promised smaller government. I promised lower tax spending. And I think we had more important things to do than to teach the Native American language. All they need to do is require it in their schools for 1 hour a day. I caught them in the hall, and here's what they said openly. We're going to ask for a whole bunch of bills requesting money, and if you're willing to give it to us, we should take it. So there's a very important lesson there. We need to say no. Okay? Now the reason this is important is I'm going to guess this is going to start spreading out in other states. So you better be ready for it. Well, another bill they had was we feel that the water, the Salish Kootenai tribe, is our water, and we want control of water rights off the reservation. And I'm thinking to myself, this is bizarre. If I had come up with a bill that said we're going to take the water rights from the Indians on their reservation, I'm sure I'd be in some serious trouble. But here they're asking for water rights off of the reservation. The amount of water we're talking about is more water rights than 3 states' Indian reservations combined. It is millions and millions of acres of water. And they have the right to lease it to whoever they want. The highest bidder could be the state of California. Interesting. So, am I going to prepare the farmers to now pay more for water than they ever have before, where their crops may not even be viable? Maybe. So, if we don't give it to you, we don't give you the water compact, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to come with 10,000 lawsuits. You can look this up online. And Randy, the Indian reservation, the Native American attorneys are going to sue you. 10,000 lawsuits. I said, okay. If we give you the water compact, and you promise me you won't sue us? No. We're going to sue you. All this is recorded. It's all, you can listen to it all online. So I expected the press and the newspapers to say, wow, this is a revelation. Fauci uncovered something. But the newspapers were in favor of the water compact. So the newspapers do what they do best. And they didn't say anything. So the public didn't hear it. So if the reservations in California see what happened in Montana, I would expect that they're going to say, we want the water rights off the reservation in California, just like what we did in Montana. Now, of course, we have a governor race. Brad Johnson and Greg Gianforte are both running for governor. Greg is going to announce in January. Brad Johnson's announced now. I prepared them and said, look, if we come up with legislation to reverse this decision, I'm going to push it pretty hard. What are you going to do? Well, Brad Johnson waffled a little bit. He said, I think it's up to the people in Washington, D.C. to decide for this now. And I said, well, I think if the people of the state and a representative can come up with some way to reverse this, defang and take the teeth out of it, come up with some legislation, we're damn well better than before that. What are you going to do? I didn't get a straight answer actually from any one of them, but I'm committing to everyone here in Montana. I'm going to go back after this. Because if they get away with it, every reservation in the United States is going to go after this. You think you have water problems in California now? Wait until the Indian reservations say they control. And that's exactly what happened in Montana. And Republicans, about 10 of them, joined the Democrats. no tax that can be done. Okay. So, I guess that's the best way.
So now federal government is going to do that.
Maybe Agenda 21 is getting what they want to begin with. This could all have been a plan to control the headwaters. The waters start in Montana. On one side of the Rocky Mountains, it goes to Washington. On the other side, it goes to the Mississippi. And Montana has a lot of water. Now they might be able to control it. Somebody mentioned they could take coal and move it to California through a pipeline. The coal's ground in the dust, it's mixed with water, the slurry comes out, the water pharmacy separates from the coal, and the water can sell as much as the coal. And the Native Americans can sell that, taking it from the Montana forest, and we have the world's record production of wheat. What's that going to do with the cost of flour? Not sure.
So it really indicates who's in the driver's seat. The federal government comes in. So the Indians are a sovereign nation. They can decide which constitution they want to live by. And they can choose which of our laws they abide by and which they can impose.
Oh, it gets better than that.
So it keeps us dancing around because we might be called racist if we don't agree with it.
Well, let me tell you what else is. On the $2 million they got for the Native American language, we have asked if they spent the money or how they spent the money or what actually was given. They're going to say we're a sovereign nation, we don't have to divulge that, and we can vote in things.
I'm so glad to see it all. It's so complex. It's hard to explain all our citizens, but I'm glad you are where you are. Because we want you back in the element.
I was looking this over, and when you had this Montana legislative guide out, and so when we were in high school government class, whatever, we were taught the same schoolhouse rock style, how to pass a bill. How do you unpass a bill? How do you get a bill that's been passed or signed into law? How do you make it how do you take it out?
That's a good question. I really believe we have too many laws. And one of the things that wasn't able to find, which is exactly that. I think there's a lot of laws that need to be taken out. As I understand it, we introduced the bill to take out the law that was not done. But one thing is for certain, there are so many laws. Some of us are breaking the law, I don't even know if there's too many laws. There's some awfully silly laws. For instance, they throw a gun guy. Dueling, challenging someone to a duel in Montana is still legal. And I actually was going to challenge a trial attorney in the House to duel because he lied. But I was told if you do this, your political career is going to be over. I heard that all the time. Like you mentioned 1041, your political career is going to be over. Not only did I mention it, I introduced the bill with the help of people at Vanderbilt. But if you kill the guy, you have to take care of his family the rest of their life. It's odd, but maybe that needs to be removed. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'll try to make the question not too long. My understanding is, no, I won't do that. My understanding is from science that this planet has experienced at least 5 ice ages, beginning as far back as 2.4 billion years, and the last one ending somewhere around 12,000 years ago. This tells me that this planet has gone through major climate changes over a very long period of time. And none of those appear to have ever happened because there were SUVs and coal-burning plants and a bunch of cows. When the people in the climate change business talk about climate change in such a small period of time, do they ever put it in the context of what the planet has been doing for billions of years?
No, they're only looking at like the last 40 years. So no, they never do.
So it's taken completely out of context.
it is not the truth. They take this is why the hockey stick is so important, because they take a snippet of time where it spikes. So our scientists, I say our scientists, people who want the truth, had a fabulous presentation. In fact, I have a book back there, I can't remember the name of it, but I collected it in Paris. And I think it would do us all very well to read this small book to get very proficient on what these climate deniers is what they're called, but I call them truthers, are saying. And whether it's ocean acidification, like Patrick Moore, who used to be the Greenpeace, right? You've heard Patrick Moore, awesome. He was the co-founder of Greenpeace. He is no longer with Greenpeace. In fact, he is now a climate denier. And he does a whole presentation. By the way, the presentations of our scientists will be available, I think, in a couple of weeks online. And they're fascinating. They're like 10, 15, 20 minutes. They're brief, but they go through slide after slide, just of science and what the United Nations is forecasting, and how their forecasts are so far off that it'll make your head spin. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert, I read the documents. And the United Nations is guilty of always just taking snippets. So the climate's changing, it's changing all the time, it's changing around me right this very second. And so one of the points that the scientists made, our scientists made over and over is, if you have global cooling, so the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, wants to maintain or reduce the global temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius. And what our scientists are saying is, you do not want cooling, because things don't grow. Things actually flourish in a warmer temperature. The polar bears flourish because there's more feed. In fact, there were 7,000 polar bears when Al Gore was born, and there's over 35,000 polar bears today, and yet that's their pet project. By the way, I'm working on a film with J.D. King. I don't know if any of you heard of J.D. King, but he did Crying Wolf for you Montanans. He did a great documentary called Crying Wolf. And then we did one together, which Michael Shaw and I are in, where Moncton's in. Siskiyou County is referenced in there. And so it's Blue. It's a great documentary. It's available right now on YouTube or Vimeo. I can't remember. We were bounced off of YouTube. YouTube censored us with Blue, and we finally got the film on the internet for free. But anyway, go through that. It's a great film, and now we're working on Ice Bear, and we need funding. But the idea behind Ice Bear is to actually go to the Arctic and Antarctic and have testimony of whether or not the glaciers are melting or they're growing, because we're told all sorts of things. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope I gave some information.
I believe you did, in that what is not being talked about is which I would agree there is climate change. That's all. If we had 5 ice ages, which means 4 or 5 of them ended, maybe 6 of them, then we've constantly had climate change. That's the nature, that's the natural nature of this planet. And that they're taking their science and their specifics out of context to make a point, which means if you look at one spot on a painting, you may see blue, but if you look around it, you see all the other colors. So they're taking it out of context. And if they want to work, as my understanding, they're working for climate cooling, because climate warming is so bad and CO2 is so bad, because that helps make a lot of plants grow. This is terrible. That if you want climate cooling, they're about to get it, because the sun is about to go into a cooler mode.
Yeah, and some of the scientists would agree with you, especially Willie Soon from Boston, who's actually originally from China. But fascinating character. His area of expertise is actually the sun and the solar radiation. And he thinks we're going into a small global cooling.
Which
what he said is, when we go through that phase, you're going to wish there was global warming.
But if they get what they want, they'll be able to take credit for the lack of global warming.
And they will. Either way they win. Either way, the IPCC and the UN win. Because if we do go through a cooling, they are going to say, oh, look what we did. We saved the day. And if we go through a warming, they're going to say, see, we told you so. You should have listened to us.
And we have to have more power to do more.
Right.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Gary Arnold. When you were talking about Agenda 21 controlling every specific step, I think we might be being fooled through a Sapian language. I think the forensic evidence points not to control, but to cull and to kill. They don't need gulags if they're depopulating, because they're the same number of people. They only need open trenches. What do you think that makes this not the final solution? We need this Agenda 21 is being set up. The food stocks are being reduced. All of the stuff is being done, and we're talking about we're going to live in these little squares. I don't think they're that kind or that nice. I think they're eliminating people, as suggested or written through Georgia Guidestones, Committee of 300, and their communication back and forth. I think this is an outright war. The killing is presently going on through a half a dozen different ways that people here can prove and show.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it might be Pollyanna to think they're going to be nice to us, to let us exist under their controls because we're useless eaters unless we're trained for a specific job. The only people that are allowed to live will be that 500 billion that they're creating for their own paradise here on Earth.
Yeah, I can't really speak to immediate depopulation measures. I can speak to their documents. One of the books that I usually carry around with me is called the Global Biodiversity Assessment. It's 1,140 pages, and I have gone through that thing quite a bit. And in the human impacts on biodiversity section, it does talk about that if the world was to continue living as we do in North America, in other words, our consumption patterns are the fact that we eat meat, the world could only handle 500 million to 1 billion people. If we were to live as peasants on a peasant diet, the world can handle 5 to 7 billion people. So it does suggest, but the answer is to stop consumption, to stabilize the world's population, to suggest that this is where they go into the family planning and getting women, bringing women up and educating women, because an educated woman would not have 5 children, is what they're suggesting. So in my opinion, Gary, in this battle, I would not say they are directly killing people. And I don't know if that's what, I mean, I think that there are some impacts, and we know that they, you can look at PG&E and see patents for cloud seeding. So there are things that they're doing to the environment. Here's something that, there's a couple things that and maybe this is a parlay, but when it comes to man-made global warming or climate change, man-made climate change, I don't think they're lying, because I do think that there is manipulation of our environment. When it comes to the seas rising, if you look at all the dams that are being removed across the United States, in fact, Bruce Babbitt, the former Department of Interior, back in 2013 on a Patagonia website and an REI, maybe not REI, Patagonia and Prana website, said that under the Obama administration, the Elwha, they finally got the funding to remove the Elwha Dam. At this point, this is the largest dam removal in the United States of America. What's happening in Northern California is the largest dam removal project in worldwide history, and that is where my parents' ranch is. It's the Klamath River Basin, and they want to remove 4, by the way, this is the Mungers, Mungers are, Charles Munger Sr. is Warren Buffett's right hand. Warren Buffett owns these dams, these clean, green, renewable energy dams on the Klamath River. And they are wanting to remove these dams based on tribes, the Karuk, I call them the crooked, and the Yurok and the Huban. There's a whole bunch of other tribes along the Klamath River Basin. But what they're doing throughout California, and you all know this, they're claiming a fish, whether it's the Delta smelt or the coho salmon, both truck and haul fish. Coho salmon you can buy $8.99 at Whole Foods, wild salmon, $8.99 a pound. And what they're doing is saying for the fish, we need to release hundreds and hundreds of billions of whatever, 100 millions of cubic feet by the time you look at all, across the United States. How much water they release, I don't know the exact number, but we're talking a lot of water just going out to the ocean. Whether they're flushing a river to clean it for better water quality or releasing it for the fish. So yeah, we've got sea rises. If you're not going to store the water and you're just going to release it, of course the sea is going to rise.
Your science advisor, John P. Holdren, in his book, advocates putting sterlins in the water food.
Well, I don't know that. I haven't read that part, but I'm sure. We do know that there is, we've got fluoride in our water, we've got chlorine in our water. The scientists in Paris, our scientists were saying that chlorine is actually really good. Don't worry about it. But fluoride is a different matter. So there's total manipulation of our environment by people. So, I think that the climate is, being manipulated by people. I did go to a Post talk. The Post is, Michael, help me out, Post, Peninsula Open Space Trust. And it's a very well-funded organization. And I went to a talk. I go to lots of talks. I go to U.S. Fish and Wildlife meetings. I go to wolf hearings. I'm on phone calls. I'm all over the place because they're not telling us the truth, and I think that we all deserve the truth. So, Post, I went to a talk with a former Rolling Stone. No, maybe he's still with Rolling Stones. I don't remember his name, but, and I don't talk about this often, but he had slides where he was saying we are doing climate change through through chemtrails. He had planes. These were most people in this audience were liberals, and they did, because Post is mostly a liberal-based organization. It's the Bay Area. These people, lots of money, Stanford, Palo Alto, and they didn't even blink an eye. He also had another picture. So he showed a jet, and he showed all kinds of stuff coming out. He even showed the inside of the jet and how they had these tanks. The other thing he showed was that Bill Gates has been involved in creating these huge wave machines. So they're like towers that are on the ocean that create waves. So there is manipulation of the environment by man. And there is water rising when you release lots of water out to the sea. So, in a way, I don't think they're lying.
Hey, I got a question now. Michael? I think that you address Mike for a second. Last question about the deliberate thinning of the population, whether it's through the process of killing a reproductive reduction is an interesting one. And I'm wondering if anybody's interested in this issue. I ran across a rather thin document. I haven't even understood it. But it's a very long timeline. The surprising result of this study is that the population, the birth rate, I should say, of community after community around the world is directly related to the date of which fluoridation was added to the local waters. And it came to the surprising conclusion that the stabilization of the human population is more related to fluoridated water than the other two. And that this cannot be. It suggests that these, perhaps, the preferred method of population reduction may be reduction in first place. It doesn't rule out the other possibilities. If anybody wants to see that document, just send it to me.
Michael, thanks. My name is John Sison. I got a question there. I'm actually reading from an article here. The Arctic seems to be warming up. Reports from the fishermen, seal hunters, and explorers who still live areas about Spitsbergen and the Eastern Arctic all point to a radical change in climate conditions. Period and period of high temperatures in that part of the Earth's surface. What's interesting though is this is actually from 1905. And I want your take on those things.
I'm not an expert on the climate change issue generally, but it's been the case that anecdotal stories from most of the time about changes regular. In fact, there's a volcano spring under the ocean floor. That's causing both icebergs to melt, and that's causing a warming in the water. That's volcanic. Causing that. In general, I know that the ice is increasing with orange and water. So it just seems to me that the streams will be pushed by that it is. And I live in a strange place. It doesn't get warm there. The southern elements to me, based on where I live, there's been the warm. Those people live down. I think that's the warmest. So it's straight more.
How much pushback do you get? Okay, you use it up
And ask how much pushback has there been from the general population. I would say a lot. I like to think that people that I encounter don't like to fight it. That's they lose. Instead of lose, they would rather they want it. That's the general reaction.
Earlier, you had mentioned something about the United Precious Metals Association and the work that they try to assist state government legislation.
Sure. I had the great honor and pleasure about a month and a half ago, actually a couple of months ago, I was contacted by the United Precious Metals Association and asked if I would attend their annual conference and consider being nominated as a director on the board. And learned a great deal about that, and I was selected for their board of governors. The United Precious Metals Association is a group out of Utah that through state legislation in the state of Utah, they have passed a law that allows the transactions and use of gold and silver to back their coinage and their financial system. They're working with 12 states right now in passing similar legislation in 12 states. I work with, in the state of Montana, with a legislator by the name of Bob Wagner
two terms, and Ed worked with us on this, to pass a sound money bill that would do a very similar thing to what they're doing in Utah. In Utah, they have established a vaulting process through Brinks has a vault in Salt Lake City, and they have established a system where they will take Federal Reserve notes and they will convert them to gold and silver coin, and then they will issue you a debit card or a credit card through Visa, and they're also working with a credit union out of the state of Utah, and they're also working on putting together an IRA program where you can transfer IRA funds into the same thing. And this will be 100% backed by gold and silver. I mean, what a phenomenal idea. And it will be audited on a quarterly basis to make sure that the money is there. I suggest that all of you that are interested in this go to upma.org, and it will answer all of your questions. Ronald Reagan, one of the good things, one of the great things he did, in 1986 through the Gold Commission, which Ron Paul was his point made the reissue of gold and silver coins in denominations that were standard denominations, part of our coin system. He set the groundwork to allow this to happen and hope that it would happen. And it is beginning to happen in the United States. So if you want to protect your assets, your portfolio, this is an excellent way to do it. And they will take your crummy, lousy Federal Reserve notes, and they will convert them at whatever the COMEX price on gold and silver is. And they will convert it at that point, and then they will establish a value. And you can go right to their website. I've got an account with them, and I'm going to move a lot more with them as these things come online. But you can go to your account anytime, and it's right there. It tells you how much money you've got based on whatever the spot price of silver is, or gold, plus whatever seniorage charge they're recommending. So please check it out, because this gives you an opportunity to protect your money. And we hope that there's a lot of states that will come on board. And Randy, you're going to be one of the guys to carry this bill when we get it in the state of Montana.
I do have a question. And actually, it's an example for everyone here, which is this. If you run and win, and you hear something you like, you can stand up and say, I'll introduce that. You see the importance of you running and winning. So you see something you're passionate about, now you can introduce it. That's exactly what's taking place. When he's talking about, I'm committed to carrying that legislation. So I want you guys to see that. And you do.
Presentation today was outstanding. Thank you very much. Toward the end of it, you indicated something about developing a battle plan. And I just wondered if there's anything you can share with us about what your battle plan would look like.
Well, yeah, first of all, there are two things that I was trying to do. Number one, I was using Islam as a way to show how they're trying to manipulate what I believe mostly, in the United States, make the vast majority of people go against their core beliefs that they believe are true. And the second part of it is if we're at war, we're not using those tools.
but why aren't we using those tools with truth? When I heard your brief and I saw some of the things in the Agenda 2030, I mean, how perfect would it be if we put out words like, you know, and whether you made it, you know, comedy, because a lot of it could be a comedy, but it's the truth, it's using their words, what they say, or you use it, you know, seriously, we really like to support the humanity, but I want to know how we're going to stop violence of women in the home. I mean, you can take a number of their things and just start putting the truth out, and people are going to say, this is the craziest bunch of crap I've ever seen. You know, but you're getting the truth out in real small pieces. You're using information, you're using truth, you know, and it takes some creativity and artistic ability to put out there short snippets on all the available social media in different places, and people will start hitting on it because it's funny. It's true, and it's funny. And you generate an education system that goes out really quickly. But if I was gonna say what's our strategic plan, I would start with the strategic end state. If it was me, my strategic end state would be something that would be very specific, that would provide me with what I see. And I see a constitutional government as it was intended by our founding fathers. So if I start with a strategic end state, it would be very specific. Restore a constitutional government in the United States. Now, most people will tell you that's an impossibility if too far down the line, just like unconditional surrender. But I'm telling you, you can do it. You can do it in phases. But if I said to you, I said my strategic end state is to restore a constitutional government in the United States. What would you have to do? What would be the one thing you have to do? You have to elect constitutional candidates, correct? You know, I'm just throwing that out as a thought, because the truth is, it really doesn't matter what Bill Koch thinks. The brief wasn't about what Bill Koch thinks. The brief was just meant to stir you up to think, to question what you think. Because you start questioning. My problem is I spent years not questioning. There's Kaiser and on, you know. And I live in my own little world, and most of America does. So the thing is, we have to ask them questions. But we have to entertain them. That was incredibly entertaining brief. But look at all the information. Look, there were scuffles in the crowd because we couldn't believe it. Right? Well, why don't we use their tools, you know, and use social media and put out an information campaign that's based on truth?
I like your ideas about not being defensive and being deliberate. And I think what ties into one person to talk about dealing with the press, if people, rather than be victims of them, if they put together clips and phrases and give newspaper people copy, I've experienced that they'll write the copy whether they are friendly to you or not. It's something like, you know, the Soviets get the wheat, the Americans get the chaff, or the Jesse Jackson type things. And if you're prepared ahead of time, you're going to save, and you're going to penetrate through their fog and their disapproval. I worked with Howard Jarvis in Proposition 13. We tried all kinds of different ways, and it ended up taking them the blunt attack, pretty much what Trump is doing now, and the shrugging the shoulders and pulling away from the parliamentary back and forth, and that made us succeed with that initiative with such a great number.
I think we have so many tools at our disposal, but yet we sit back on the defense and we react to the law statements. We react to the freedom statement. We react to whatever they do. And as a whole, we believe in, we're kind of a people, if we're constitutional, we just want you to leave us alone. But we kind of get that mentality that we're only going to stand up and fight when something's at stake,
But my question is, are we at war? And if we're at war, we got to fight. We never win a war on the defense. And can't show me that in history. When the government would spend a lot of money to teach me about war. There's a quote Sun Tzu that a lot of people are very familiar with. Well, when we go to war, we go force on force. We're going to attack them. They made us, we attack them. Sun Tzu says, attack more than arms. What's been the most effective thing about the Obama presidency? Just one hit after another hit after another hit after, so we line up and fight against that, fight against that. And we have a battle plan that puts them on the defense. Does that make sense? And what I'm saying is, you have the capability. You people are brilliant. You've been at this a lot longer than I am. You can make a strategic plan that's phased, because when we want an unconditional surrender of Japan, we didn't load up ships and go to Japan. We went this island hopping campaign. We extended our lines of communication, our sea lines of communication, our airfields. We moved in a very direct basis. So we got to the point that we could invade Japan or drop it off.
Every region has a cable TV system, and they allow you to put it on.
Every city and county has a cable system for free publication, free access, thank you. And there are DVDs out there that are permitted to be put on. And we do that in Santa Cruz constantly. And they don't play it just once. They schedule it repeatedly throughout the days. And just with the people here, we could reach several million people just by doing that. And the other item, there's a podium at every city council and every board of supervisors. And that gets usually replayed on community TV. It goes into the record, and you can, show your graphics also. And this is just being ignored by so many of us.
And I think you have to use every avenue you have. But look at the people in America. What did they do? What's the most common form of media used in America today? Yeah. And what are they on? Facebook. You know what I mean? Can you imagine a good little production? If my wife's on Facebook, I was an Intel guy. But anyway, she'll say, hey, look at this is really funny, or whatever, and then I'll watch it, and I'm like, that's really good, it's got 30,000 hits on it, or, a million hits on it. What I'm saying is, put your resources where they're going to be best utilized. You know what I mean? If it's not the newspaper anymore, don't utilize it, unless it's convenient. If it's not TV, or we can't get it appointment, don't use it. Use what's free. Put your resources towards creativity, professional filming, those short things. Something that's just going to hit people. They're going to share it with everybody. But go on your tab. I'm looking at that stuff today, and Dan happened to this conversation. I remember the first time somebody told me about Virginia 21. Is that some meeting and some kind of rough-looking character came up? I heard about Agenda 21. I said, no, I've never heard of it. They started telling me, and I'm kind of moving away. This is that conspiracy stuff. Well, being an intel officer, I went home and he says you can see it, so I went started researching. And I'm like, it's 100 times worse than anything he told me. That's what they're saying. And then I started sitting through Dan Hampel's classes, and everybody else is like, and Dan got a great thing. He said, I give you how much is well, it's about $1,000. Yeah, you say anybody, $1,000 if this isn't true. Dan's always held on to that $1,000. Okay, Dan. Thank you, Bill.
Right. Probably not to wake up in 3 hours, so. And then watch the video.
Okay, this, we're gonna, try to, put the phone up here where, you talk about, what you hear for, and, this, so, you're on, I'll put the speaker.
You
ready to go?
Yes, you're on.
All right, well, out of the 60 people who were there before, what percentage of your audience do you think you kept? 3 of us. Didn't hear that.
90%.
Right, oh, outstanding. Well, I have a special message from a special person. And one of my colleagues and friends, who I've been working with for over a year, is a famous guy, a finance guy, a Harvard MBA, who's real good friends with a guy by the name of Jerome Corsi from World Net Daily. And Charles K. Ortel, my friend, who is a financial genius, was the brains behind the work that went into the expose of the Clinton Foundation. And they found all sorts of irregularities. Mrs. Clinton was in the business of selling influence to foreign countries as the Secretary of State. And what I've learned today is that the Clinton Foundation, who is a big doo-doo over failure to follow the necessary financial reporting requirements, she and her foundation have raised over $50 billion. That's with a B in extortion from foreign governments. They call it gifts. And what we've learned today is that well, not only do we want Mr. Obama to step up to the plate and make the Clinton Foundation disgorge all of their criminally gotten gains, but it turns out that Mr. Obama is setting up his own foundation as well. So I guess the American people are entitled to know if influence peddling is now going to be the rule rather than the exception in American governmental activities. So Charles asked me to tell you folks about the upcoming Obama Foundation, and Mr. Obama will prosecute and will force the Clinton Foundation to give back the monies that they took. So that was one little breaking news item that I thought you'd enjoy. And Charles invites everybody who is listening to my voice to become a Facebook friend of his so they can get all of the documentation that have been presented through World Net Daily that have caught the Clintons red-handed in all sorts of violations that should end them up in prison pretty much for the rest of their lives. So please join in as a Facebook friend. Of course, I invite you not only to join Charles K. Ortel on Facebook, but I go by
Robert T. Fanning on Facebook, and my CV, my resume, can be found on LinkedIn, and I will be delighted to have all of you connect with me on LinkedIn. So I guess we're at the juncture now where you've had a chance to ruminate on what I've said before, and I'm here to answer questions.
We have a question coming on now.
Great.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I got a question about carbon credit trading, and I'm looking at some carbon credit trading trades here. And what I found very
real bad acoustics. Real bad acoustics. I can't hear you.
Just go up on the phone. Just go up on the phone.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better.
I got a question about carbon credit trading, and I'm looking at some carbon credit trades that have been made in 2013 right now. And my question is, I'm looking at the carbon credit trades that was made somewhere in the U.S. for landfill methane destruction. But then I found about hundreds of trades that was made on renewable energy, and I was wondering, why are they having carbon credit trades on so-called carbon neutral energy?
Well, there is debits and credits. If you're involved in renewable energy, I think conjecture on my part, but I think it's an informed opinion, that people who have windmills and solar batteries are entitled to get credits that go to them. People who have electricity that is generated from coal-fired plants are obliged to pay. So there's a pay and a collect of these credits. And what I know is that Muslims cannot collect or pay interest. It's forbidden in the Quran. There's 1.5 billion of them that will be able to pay or collect carbon credits on their credit cards. And for the first time, the banking system, the banks that we call too big to fail, the banks that have caused us all of our problems, now have a chance to pull in 1.5 billion Muslims into the system where they can pay carbon credits when they buy gasoline at the pump, and they can collect in whatever fashion that they are entitled to collect carbon credits. So for the first time, we're able to draw 1.5 billion Muslims into the system, thus taxing for global governance. The intent is global governance, to finance global governance. And for the first time, we can tax the poor, the voiceless, and the common man in the Muslim world. So I hope that sheds a little light on it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, he's got one thumb up. I have a question, Bob. In your experience, how real or significant is the hedging and trading on weather insurance policy?
What type of insurance policy?
Weather. In other words, betting on the weather, hedging your large
weather futures,
weather,
whether we're going to have a hurricane or not.
yes, rain, hurricane, etc.
I would be pulling an answer out of my ass, and I don't believe it's fair to an audience of this great of sophistication to do it. I'd be delighted to find out and get back to you, but wherever they can figure out how to on the International Commodity Exchange by the International Swap Dealers Association. So there's custom-made derivatives. Those derivatives total 1.25 quadrillion in notional amount, and because they are over the counter and now newly on the International Commodity Exchange in Atlanta. That's a front. That exchange is a front for Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, who essentially have the monopoly on this, right along with Jamie Dimon. And Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan is kind of what I would consider to be the worst of the worst.
Well, the significance of the vesting was the assumption of the allegation that there was deliberate manipulation of the weather under the banner of the chemtrails and HAARP and so forth, and that the people involved may have multiple motives for this, one of which is weather modification and for military purposes. But the other is for profit on the market. And I was wondering if you have any experience with that.
No, I'd be pulling that out of my hat now. I would be doing everybody a disservice, but I'd be delighted to research it for you.
Thank you. Leading into the controls of carbon taxes and everything, there was for a long time the theory of peak oil, which was knocked out by the anti-fossil fuels that are self-generating. Abiotic, I'm trying to say. I also understand that there is something called primary water, and that's supposed to be self-generated in the earth. And I know in California, in the Yellow Pages, there are several drillers that say that they can find this primary water, which is supposedly created in the water planet in the earth somewhere.
If the water tables, the aquifers are known and unknown. And when I was fortunate enough to work at Drexel Burnham Longbear as a member of the Chicago Board of Trade, we had an oil analyst who I've continued to follow it. That was all the way back in 1984. I became familiar with Philip K. Berlinger. He's my go-to guy for oil opinions. And Philip K. Berlinger is a Canadian. And Berlinger, it has been, ever since the fracking boom, the shale oil boom got hot, he warned, from Canada, he's a Canadian, he warned that peak oil, again, was a scam. Government has manufactured scarcity and manipulated the price of oil since Spindletop blew its top back in the 19-teens. And so we have the government who is manipulating the price of oil, always up. They don't manipulate it down. And you can learn more from that on a documentary created by Payne Webber years ago called The Prize. And Berlinger is talking about, and has been talking ever since crude oil was up in the $100 range. Now it's come down to support at $40 and just crashed through 38 like crap to a goose, and is now at 35. That put T-Bob futures from 160 down to 158. And so there is a great fear of inflation global deflation based on not only on economic slowdown, but the fact that crude oil cannot seem to hold support at any level. And my target is a minimum of 22. And I can tell you that I stood in a bomb pit when Saddam Hussein marched into Kuwait, and crude oil was at $10 a barrel. Then Saddam was shooting scuds into Israel, and crude oil never budged. It never budged from $10 a barrel in that whole war scenario. When everybody and their brother was expecting crude oil to rally and bonds to crash. It never happened. There's plenty of crude oil out there. I hope I answered your question at least in part.
I'd like to know your thoughts on the gold and silver manipulation, particularly the silver, and just as far as how will that end, or is it so manipulated that they will go control the values?
I believe that you're talking to a guy who got caught long gold for damn close to a year before I got religion and realized that deflation is a bigger risk to the world than inflation. And the gold, of course, is a hedge against a failure in the currency. But my view is as long as commodities and crude oil especially continue to show their weakness, and that weakness is illustrated in crashes in currencies like Venezuela, Turkey, and Russia. Until those currencies stabilize, until those commodity currencies stabilize, I wouldn't bet my mother's retirement on gold. I do believe gold will eventually find a bottom, but I think for those in the audience who want to watch gold and want to watch it through a neutral eye, my favorite economist is a guy who was in prison back in the 1970s and 1980s. And I've followed him religiously as a cyclical technician. His name is Martin Armstrong, and you can subscribe to Armstrong Economics for free and see what he's got to say. And he will show you the charts of whether gold and silver are starting to show a bid and whether they're going to rally. Right now, I think that gold and silver are on the defensive, primarily because crude oil is on such defensive, and it's taking all of these currencies with it, and we'll just call the United States dollar, which is stronger than the rest, but we'll call the dollar the least stinky shirt in the hamper. So I think timing is important when looking at precious metals. But I'm also a firm believer in dollar cost averaging. So if you're stuck with $26 silver and down to 13, and it might even go to 6, make sure you have some at every price where you can dollar cost average that portion of your portfolio. Only a fool sticks all of his eggs in one basket.
And a follow-up question on that, regarding China, how important is it to watch China as far as how much gold they're importing, flow of gold from west to east? I believe that when that dries up, that's when they start to.
I believe that it's very important to continue to watch deliveries and who's taking the physical. And one of my favorite ways to monitor that phenomenon is a website called Jesse's Cafe Americana. Jesse's Cafe Americana. I read him religiously, and he's got graphics of what's in the warehouses and who's taking what. And I think that's a way to watch it. And I think that's a very, very intelligent question, because back in the olden days, I worked for a fellow by the name of Ralph Peters. Ralph Peters was chairman of the Chicago Board of Trade, chairman of the Board of Trade Clearing Corporation, and one of the most successful traders that ever walked the earth. And Ralph, because he was fortunate enough to see the positions that were coming into the clearing firm and who was owning what, he saw the Huns in '79 accumulating positions, so he accumulated as well. He realized it was overdone, that there was speculative exuberance by retail. They were all out there accumulating at a feverish pace, pushed gold up to 2,000, and silver did a sympathy move. And Ralph, as the chairman of the exchange, had to protect the clearing corporation, and he had to protect all of the member firms. So they raised the margins. Then they put in rules for liquidation only, and everything that the Huns lost, Ralph won. And so that's the kind of manipulation that I want the public to look forward to, is changes in margin requirements and retail activity. If retail is running into the currency exchanges and selling their flatware, you most probably are not going to see firmness in the precious metals. But it's a sophisticated market, and it's arbitraged into oil, it's arbitraged into dollars and every other currencies. And it's watching the warehouse receipts is a very sophisticated way to do it. And Jesse's Cafe All-American, or Jesse's Cafe American, is a very good way to watch on a daily basis. And on the left side of his page, he has a list of articles, whether they're King World News or what have you. And the articles that Jesse finds are the ones that are really, really pertinent to what's going on in precious metals. I hope that helps.
It does indeed. This is it, Bob. It's time now for us to conclude our meeting here. I know we could sit here all night and listen to your wisdom, but I do thank you for joining us again. And I'm just going to say we have to sign off now. And
I appreciate that, and I hope that everybody joins me and connects with me on LinkedIn, and I hope that they connect with Charles K. Ortel on his Facebook page, because this Clinton scandal is well worth paying attention to now that Mr. Obama has decided that he wants to be a foundation too.
There's enough to go around here now. So thank you again. Good night.
Great to hear you. Bye-bye.
Was that Lordtel or Hortel?
ORTL.
Well, unless there's something really urgent, I think it is time to cash in. We have a meeting starting tomorrow morning. We have a board of directors meeting starting at 9 o'clock up the hill. And I guess everybody knows you have to be up at my place at noon tomorrow. And no excuses, unless it rains and you slide off the hill or something like that. But so I think it's time to say thank you and good night, and I'll see you in the morning.